The last Dreath in existence was tired of living, but the archives would not let him die. Cylon had spent 8,000 years inside the repository, a station built at the edge of known space where dying civilizations came to leave their final words. He had watched 417 species go extinct. He had cataloged their histories, their sciences, their art, and their warnings. He knew more about death than any creature alive. So when the human ship appeared on his sensors, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. Repository Station, this is the Earth vessel Remembrance requesting permission to dock. The voice was female, confident, speaking the common galactic tongue with an accent Cylon had never heard before. We come in peace to study your archives. Cylon's 3 hearts beat faster. He had known this day would come. The humans had joined the Galactic Assembly 5 years ago after developing faster-than-light travel in what the Assembly considered record time. They were curious, they were everywhere, and now they were here. Permission granted, Cylon said, because he had no authority to refuse. The repository was neutral ground. All species had the right to access its records. Even the species that every record warned about. Commander Nira Okonkwo was the first human to step onto the repository. She was tall, dark-skinned, with gray streaks in her short hair and calm brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. Behind her came a younger man with a data pad, already scanning the walls. "I am Cylon," the Dreath said, his 4 arms folded in the traditional greeting of peaceful intent. "I am the keeper of this place." "Thank you for having us." Nira smiled and Cylon flinched. Human teeth, so many human teeth. "This is Lieutenant Davi Santos, our linguist. We are here to study the records of extinct civilizations, to learn from them." "A noble goal." Cylon turned and began walking deeper into the station. "The repository contains the final records of 417 species, their histories, their technologies, their cultures." He paused. "And their warnings." "Warnings?" Davi looked up from his data pad. "About what?" Cylon did not answer. He led them through corridors lined with glowing crystals, each one containing the compressed knowledge of a dead world. The humans looked at everything with hungry eyes. They asked questions constantly. They wanted to touch, to understand, to know. This was what made them dangerous. After 3 days of study, Nira noticed the pattern. "Cylon," she found him in the central archive, organizing new data crystals that would never be filled. "I have been reading the final messages from dozens of species, the Vorith, the Melish, the Kreth, the Thesic." She held up her data pad. "They all mention the same thing." Cylon's scales turned pale. Many species share common concerns. "No, they all mention the same planet." Nira's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "A small world, third from a yellow star. They call it different names, but the coordinates are always the same." "Commander, perhaps you should rest. The archives can be overwhelming for new visitors." "The Vorith message is 12,000 years old. It says, and I quote, 'If you find the third world of the yellow star, do not wake them. Do not land. Do not make contact. Leave them in their darkness.'" Cylon said nothing. "The coordinates match Earth exactly." Nira stepped closer. Her eyes were no longer calm. "Why are there dozens of warnings about my planet from species that went extinct before humans even had writing?" Cylon looked at this human, this representative of the most feared species in galactic history, and he told her the truth. "Because every species that encountered your world learned the same lesson." His voice was barely a whisper. "And most of them did not survive to warn anyone else." Nira stared at him. "What lesson?" Cylon pulled up a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with hundreds of red dots, each one marking the homeworld of an extinct species. Lines connected them to a single point, a tiny blue dot in an unremarkable arm of the spiral. "Earth." "The lesson," Cylon said, "is that humans are the reason the galaxy learned to fear." Davi had joined them now, his face pale as he read the warnings scrolling across his pad. "This is impossible. Humans only developed space travel 60 years ago. We have not had time to do anything to anyone. You misunderstand. Cylon brought up another display, this one showing a timeline. These warnings are not about what you will do. They are about what you already did. 10,000 years ago, 20,000, 50,000. His voice cracked. Before you even knew the stars existed, you were already teaching them to be afraid. Nira felt cold. How? We were primitive, we had nothing. You had everything that mattered. Cylon looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. You had patience, you had memory, you had rage that could outlast generations. He turned off the display, and you had something no other species ever developed. What? The ability to hate forever. The repository fell silent. Somewhere in its depths, the archived voices of 400 dead civilizations waited to tell humanity exactly what it was. And why the galaxy had prayed they would never reach the stars. 73 species had left specific testimonies about Earth. 73 voices from the dead, all saying the same thing in different words. Do not go there, do not contact them, do not let them know you exist. Nira had not slept in 2 days. She sat in the restricted archive with Davi and Dr. Amara Diallo, the team's anthropologist who had arrived on a supply ship the day before. The holographic projectors surrounded them, ready to play the recorded testimonies of the extinct. I need to see them all, Nira said. Her voice was hoarse. Every single one. Cylon stood at the entrance, his scales still pale with fear. Commander, I must advise against this. No species has ever requested full access to the Earth files. Most civilizations know to leave these records alone. Most civilizations did not grow up on the planet you are all so afraid of. Nira turned to face him. Play the testimonies. The first hologram flickered to life. A creature that looked like a praying mantis made of crystal stood in the projection field. The Vorith, extinct 12,000 years ago. We found the third world during the Great Cold. The voice was translated by the repository systems, but the fear came through clearly. The dominant species was primitive. They had no technology. They huddled in caves and wore animal skins. We took what we needed from their world, minerals, water, biological samples. The Vorith paused, and Nira saw something she did not expect. Shame. We did not think they would notice. We did not think they would remember. We were wrong. The crystal creature's form flickered. They saw our ships in their skies. They painted images of us on their cave walls. They told stories about us to their children, and their children told their children. For 1,000 years, they remembered. Davi was writing frantically on his pad. Amara stood frozen, her dark eyes wide. When they developed astronomy, they found the star we came from. When they developed radio, they sent us messages. When they developed spacecraft, they came for us. The Vorith's voice broke. It took them 8,000 years, 8,000 years of technological development driven by a single purpose, finding us. The hologram showed a fleet of primitive human ships, barely capable of faster than light travel, arriving at the Vorith homeworld. They did not attack immediately. They asked questions first. They wanted to know why we had taken from them. They wanted us to admit what we had done. A long pause. When we could not give them an answer they found acceptable, they left. We thought it was over. It was not over, Nira whispered. She already knew how this ended. They returned 100 years later with better ships. Then again 50 years after that. Each time more advanced, each time more numerous. They did not conquer us. They did not need to. The Vorith seemed to collapse inward. They simply waited. They watched us decline. They studied our weaknesses, and when we were too weak to resist, they took everything we had ever taken from them, plus interest. The hologram faded. Another took its place, a creature like a floating jellyfish, the Mellish, extinct 9,000 years ago. We observed the humans from orbit. We were scientists. We only wanted to study them. The Mellish's voice was soft, almost musical. They were in their Bronze Age. They should not have been able to detect us. But they did, Amara said quietly. They looked up at our ship in the night sky. We thought they would be afraid. We thought they would worship us as gods. The jellyfish pulsed with color. They smiled. They waved. And then they went back to their work building and planning and growing. That does not sound dangerous, Davy said. We intercepted their communications centuries later when they developed radio. They had recorded the exact position of our ship, the exact date and time we appeared. They had calculated our probable origin point. They had been planning a response for 3,000 years. The Melish's form trembled. They were not afraid of us. They were not impressed by us. They simply added us to a list of things to deal with later. More testimonies followed. The Kreth, who had made the mistake of killing a human hunting party 60,000 years ago. The humans had found their homeworld using nothing but mathematics and memory, traveling for generations in slow ships just to reach them. The Thessic, who had tried to help humanity and paid the ultimate price for saying no. The Valan, who had hidden from humans for 10,000 years before being found anyway. Species after species, all telling the same story. Humans remembered, humans planned, humans waited, and humans always came. Why did they all go extinct? Nira asked when the testimonies finally stopped. Why did we destroy them all? Cylon looked at her with something that might have been pity. You did not destroy them all, Commander. Some died of natural causes, some destroyed themselves, some simply faded away. He paused. But the ones who wronged your species, those ones you finished, every single one. Amara spoke for the first time in hours. This cannot be true. There is no record of any of this in human history. Because you did not want to remember. Cylon pulled up a new display. Your species has a remarkable ability to forget its own atrocities. You remember your victims as myths, monsters, demons. He showed images of ancient human art, paintings of strange creatures, carvings of beings from the sky. You knew them, you killed them, and then you forgot them. Nira stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Why are you showing us this? Because you asked. Cylon's voice was tired. And because the galaxy deserves to know what humanity will do when it learns the truth about itself. The archives waited in silence, holding the testimony of the dead and the judgment of the living. Behind the deepest archive, past doors that had not opened in millennia, something was still breathing. Cylon led them down a corridor that the repository's own maps did not show. The lights here were dim, powered by ancient systems that predated the station itself. The air smelled of time and sorrow. Where are we going? Captain Yudo Tanaka walked beside Nira, his hand resting on his sidearm. He was the security chief, a man who trusted nothing and no one. The manifest says this section does not exist. The manifest lies. Cylon stopped before a massive door covered in symbols from a language that had been dead for 8,000 years. The repository has many secrets. This is the greatest of them all. The door opened with a sound like sighing. Inside was a chamber filled with soft blue light. Medical equipment lined the walls, machines that hummed with quiet purpose. And in the center, floating in a tank of clear liquid, was a creature that should not have been alive. It looked almost human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with 2 eyes, but the proportions were wrong. The limbs too long, the eyes too large, the skin a shade of purple that existed nowhere in nature. Tubes connected its body to the machines. Its chest rose and fell in a slow, peaceful rhythm. The Thessic, Amara whispered. They went extinct 8,000 years ago. All but one. Cylon approached the tank and placed his hand against the glass. The repository found him drifting in space, the last survivor of his species. We have kept him alive ever since, waiting. Waiting for what? Nira asked. For you, Cylon pressed a button on the tank. Wake him. The liquid began to drain. The creature's eyes opened, large and golden and filled with an ancient pain. It took several minutes for the machines to stabilize him, to pump air into lungs that had not worked in centuries. When he finally spoke, his voice was like dry leaves in wind. Humans, the old one looked at Nira and her team. You finally came. Yudo's hand tightened on his weapon. You know us. I watched your species grow from children to gods. The old one slowly sat up, his ancient bones creaking. My people found you 10,000 years ago. You lived in the northern part of your largest continent. You were dying. Disease, starvation, cold, we saved you. The testimonies said you tried to help us, Nira said carefully. What went wrong? The old one was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with memory. We gave you everything: medicine to cure your diseases, knowledge to grow food in any soil, tools to build shelter against the cold. His golden eyes grew distant. We stayed with you for 3 generations. We taught your children. We healed your sick. We loved you like our own. That sounds like kindness, Davy said. It was kindness, and you returned it with kindness. The old one smiled, a sad expression on his alien face. You built statues of us. You wrote songs about us. You named your children after our scholars. For 100 years we lived together in peace. Yudo frowned. Then what happened? You asked for more. The old one's smile faded. You wanted to travel between stars like we did. You wanted the technology that had let us find you in the first place. We refused. Why? Because you were not ready. Your species was brilliant but young, impulsive. We feared what you would do with such power. The old one looked at Nira. We said no. We said wait. We said perhaps in another 1,000 years. The chamber fell silent. You did not wait, the old one continued. Your leaders smiled and nodded and said they understood. They thanked us for our wisdom. They held feasts in our honor. His voice cracked. And then they started planning. Planning what? Amara asked, though her face said she already knew. Everything. They mapped our technology. They studied our biology. They learned our weaknesses. The old one's hands trembled. Within 1 generation, they had reverse-engineered our basic systems. Within 2 generations, they had weapons. Within 3 generations, they had a plan. We killed you, Nira said flatly, for saying no. You did not hate us. That was the terrible thing. Tears ran down the old one's purple cheeks. Your soldiers wept as they killed my people. They apologized to us. They built monuments to honor us. They genuinely loved us. He looked at her with eyes that had seen the end of his world. You simply decided that you needed what we had more than you needed us alive. Yudo stepped back, his face pale. That is not possible. No species would do that. Your species would. The old one stood slowly, leaning against the tank for support. You are not evil. That is what the galaxy never understood. You are not cruel. You are not hateful. You are kind and grateful and loyal to those who help you. Then why? Nira asked. Because you are also practical. The old one limped toward her, his ancient body barely holding together. When kindness and survival come into conflict, you choose survival, every time, without hesitation, without mercy. He stopped before her, looking up into her human eyes. And then you cry about it afterward. Nira had no response. What could she say? The old one had described humanity perfectly. He had shown her the mirror, and she recognized the face looking back. I have waited 8,000 years to deliver one final message to your species. The old one placed his hand over his heart in what might have been a thesic gesture of respect. We should have said yes. We should have given you the stars, because you were going to take them anyway. We only could have chosen whether you took them as friends or as conquerors. He smiled one last time. You chose for us, as you always do. Word traveled fast between the stars. Within 3 days of the old one's awakening, the repository was no longer empty. Ships arrived from a dozen worlds, carrying representatives of dying species who still numbered in the thousands. The Galactic Assembly sent an official observer, a tall creature named Frel whose body was made entirely of light. They gathered in the central chamber, a space designed for exactly this purpose. The final judgment of dangerous species. The remnants, as they called themselves, sat in a ring around the humans. Their eyes, where they had eyes, were filled with fear. We have called this gathering to address a crisis. Frel's voice echoed through the chamber. The human species has discovered the archive of warnings. They know what their ancestors did. The question before us is simple. What will they do now? Nira stood in the center of the ring, her team behind her. She felt like a defendant in a trial where the verdict had already been decided. We request the right to speak in our defense, she said. You may speak. Frel's light flickered. though we struggle to imagine what defense exists for the crimes documented in this repository. Nira had prepared a speech. She had spent 2 nights writing it, gathering evidence of human achievements, human kindness, human growth. She had planned to argue that humanity had changed, that the species that had hunted the stars 10,000 years ago was not the species standing before them today. But looking at the faces of the remnants, she could not say the words. "I have no defense," she said instead. "Everything in the archives is true." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Cylon stared at her in shock. Even her own team looked confused. "The Vorith took from our world and we chased them across the galaxy. The Mellish watched us without permission and we spent 3,000 years planning to find them. The Thessic helped us, loved us, and we killed them when they said no." Nira's voice was steady. "These are not lies, these are facts." "Then you admit your species is a threat to all life in the galaxy?" Frel asked. "I admit that my species has been a threat. I admit that we have caused extinction and suffering on a scale that horrifies me." Nira looked around the chamber at the survivors of so many dead worlds. "I admit that if I could go back in time and stop my ancestors, I would. But I cannot." Davi stepped forward. "May I speak?" Frel nodded. "The archives describe human nature accurately. We are persistent. We remember wrongs for generations. We plan revenge across centuries. We are capable of terrible things." Davi held up his data pad. "But the archives are also incomplete." "Explain," Frel said. "The warnings focus on what we did to others. They do not mention what we have done to ourselves." Davi pulled up images on his pad. "Human history is filled with atrocities we committed against our own kind, wars that killed millions, systems of slavery that lasted centuries, weapons that could destroy our entire planet." "This does not help your case," one of the remnants said. "It does if you understand what came next." Davi changed the images. "After each atrocity, we built monuments to remember it. We wrote books. We taught our children. We said never again, and sometimes we even meant it." He looked at Frel. "We do not hide from our nature. We fight it every single day." Ambassador Frel was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "If the Galactic Assembly denied humanity faster than light technology today, what would your species do?" Silence fell over the chamber. Nira felt her heart stop. She knew the answer. Everyone in the room knew the answer. Humanity would smile and nod and say they understood, and then they would start planning. "We would find a way to take it anyway," Nira said quietly. "Not out of cruelty, not out of hatred, just because we wanted it." She closed her eyes. "And we would feel terrible about it afterward." The remnants began to panic. Voices rose in fear and anger, demands for immediate action, for quarantine, for extinction-level response. Frel raised a hand made of light and silence returned. "The Council will vote," Frel announced. "All in favor of sending a warning to the Galactic Assembly recommending immediate containment of the human species." Every hand in the room rose. Every tentacle, every claw, every limb made of light or crystal or shadow. "The vote is unanimous." Frel turned to Nira. "A containment fleet will arrive within 1 standard week. You and your team will remain here until that time. Do not attempt to leave." Nira nodded slowly. "May I send one message to Earth?" "You may not. Any communication could warn your species, allowing them to prepare defenses or escape." Frel's light dimmed slightly. "I am sorry, Commander. You seem like a reasonable being. But your species is what it is. We cannot risk the entire galaxy on the hope that you have changed." The chamber emptied. The remnants fled back to their ships, eager to put distance between themselves and the humans. Cylon lingered at the door, looking back at Nira with something that might have been regret. "For what it is worth," he said, "I believe you are trying to be better. But you voted against us anyway." "Because trying is not the same as succeeding." Cylon lowered his head. "And the cost of being wrong is too high." He left. The humans stood alone in the chamber of judgment. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, a fleet was already gathering. Three species had discovered the warnings before humanity. All three had reacted with violence, destroying the repository and everyone in it before fleeing into the dark. The Galactic Assembly had rebuilt the station each time, adding more defenses, more backups, more contingencies. They were prepared for humanity to do the same. They were not prepared for what actually happened. The containment fleet will arrive in 6 days. Yudo paced the small room where the humans had been confined. We need to escape, warn Earth, prepare defenses. And prove everything they said about us is true. Amara sat in the corner, her head in her hands. We would be doing exactly what they expect. Who cares what they expect? Our species is about to be destroyed. Our species is about to be tested. Neera stood by the window looking out at the stars. She had been silent for hours, thinking, and so far we are failing. Davi looked up from his pad. What do you mean? The remnants expect us to fight, to run, to do whatever it takes to survive. Neera turned to face her team. That is what humans have always done, that is what the archives document, but what if we did something different? Yudo frowned. Like what except death? Like except truth. Neera walked to the center of the room. Her eyes were calm, her voice steady. She had made a decision. The archives are not wrong. Humanity did those things. We were exactly what they say we were. She looked at each of her team members in turn. But the question is not what we were. The question is what we are, what we choose to be right now in this moment. Beautiful speech, Yudo said. How does it save us? I do not know if it does, Neera smiled sadly. But I know that fighting will not save us either. The Assembly has been preparing for violent humans for thousands of years. They know exactly how to handle us if we attack. What they do not know how to handle is something they have never seen. Which is humans who stop fighting. She walked to the communication terminal in the corner of the room. It was locked, blocked from sending any signals outside the repository. But Neera had spent 3 days studying the station's systems. She knew its weaknesses. What are you doing? Cylon appeared at the door, alerted by the activity. Broadcasting to Earth. Neera's fingers moved across the controls. Everything, the entire archive, every warning, every testimony, every accusation. Cylon's scales went white. You cannot. If your species learns what the galaxy thinks of them, they will strike first. They will destroy us all. Maybe, Neera entered the final command, or maybe they will surprise you. The signal went out. Across light years, moving faster than any ship, the truth about humanity raced toward its homeworld. What have you done? Cylon collapsed against the wall. You have doomed us all. I have given my people a choice. Neera turned off the terminal. The same choice you gave me. Know what you are, decide what to do about it. For 2 days there was silence. The containment fleet arrived early, surrounding the repository with enough firepower to crack a planet. They waited for the human response. An attack, a threat, a fleet of warships screaming out of the darkness to defend their territory. Instead, they got passenger ships. Thousands of them, small vessels, civilian craft, personal shuttles. They came from every corner of human space, carrying not soldiers but ordinary people. Families, students, workers, the old and the young. What is this? Frel demanded over the communication channel. What are you doing? The answer came not from Neera, but from a human vessel called the Memory. We received the archives, we read the warnings, we know what our ancestors did. The voice was calm, unafraid. We have come to see for ourselves. The human ships did not attack. They did not threaten. They did not even try to pass the containment fleet. They simply stopped, floating in the darkness, and waited. More ships arrived, then more. Within a week, there were millions of humans surrounding the repository, vastly outnumbering the military vessels meant to contain them. You could destroy us all right now, Neera said to Frel through the communication link. Your fleet has enough weapons, we will not fight back. Then why come here, why bring so many? Because we wanted you to see us. Neera looked out the window at the endless sea of human vessels. Not as monsters, not as warnings, just as people who know what they were and are trying to be something better. On the human ships, people were reading the archives on their personal devices. They were crying. They were arguing. They were questioning everything they thought they knew about their own history. But they were not attacking. "Your ships are blocking our weapons," Frel said slowly. "If we fire on the repository, we kill millions of innocent humans." "Yes, this is a human shield, a tactic." "No," Nira shook her head. "This is a promise. We are not asking you to trust us. We are not asking you to forgive us. We are asking you to watch us, to see what we do when we learn the truth about ourselves." The containment fleet did not fire. For the first time in galactic history, humans had been shown who they were. And they had chosen to stay. 1 year later, the repository had changed. The human ships had never left. What started as a protest became a pilgrimage. Millions came to read the warnings, to understand what their species had been, to grieve for the dead and promise the living that they would be different. The containment fleet withdrew after 3 months. There was nothing to contain. The humans had done something no species had ever done before. They had read their own death sentence and responded with reflection instead of rage. Nira walked through halls that were now filled with human and alien voices. The repository had become neutral ground in the truest sense, a place where the past was preserved so the future might be different. She found the Old One in his chamber, surrounded by human visitors who had come to hear his story. He was weaker now, his ancient body finally giving up after 8,000 years of waiting, but his eyes were brighter than she had ever seen them. "Commander," he smiled when he saw her. "Or should I say director, I understand you have taken over management of this place." "Joint management," Nira sat beside him. "The remnants have agreed to share responsibility, humans and aliens working together to preserve the memory of what was lost. Including my people. Especially your people." Nira pulled out a data crystal. "We have added a new section to the archive, human testimonies about human atrocities, the wars we fought, the peoples we destroyed, the wrongs we committed against ourselves and others." The Old One took the crystal in his trembling hands. "You are preserving your own crimes. So we never forget them, so our children never forget them." Nira looked at the visitors listening in the chamber. "We are the species that remembers forever. It is time we remembered the right things." Outside the chamber, Cylon approached with a data pad. His scales had returned to their normal color months ago. He had stopped being afraid of humans. He had started being curious about them instead. "A new ship has arrived," he said. "A species called the Herath. They developed faster than light travel 3 weeks ago. This is their first journey beyond their home system. And they came here. They received a signal, the one we now broadcast to all new FTL species." Cylon showed her the pad. "We invite them to see the archives, to learn the history of the galaxy, including the warnings about Earth." Nira nodded and rose to her feet. "I will meet them." The Herath ship was small, barely large enough for its crew of 12. The beings that emerged were covered in soft fur, with large ears and nervous eyes. They looked at the repository with wonder and fear. Their leader stepped forward. "We received your signal. We read the warnings about the planet called Earth." The Herath's voice trembled. "We also read the response. We do not understand." "What do you not understand?" "The warnings say humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They say you hunt your enemies across millennia. They say you never forget a wrong." The Herath looked at Nira with confusion. "But you did not destroy this place. You did not silence the warnings. You added to them. Why?" Nira smiled. It was a question she had answered many times in the past year. She would answer it many times more. "Because the warnings were true." She gestured for the Herath to follow her into the repository. "Everything the dead species said about us was accurate. We are persistent. We are patient. We remember everything and forgive nothing. We are exactly the monsters they described." "Then why should we not flee?" "Because we are also something else." Nira stopped before the newest section of the archive, where Human testimonies played on endless loop. We are the species that looks at itself in the mirror and chooses to change. Not because we have to, not because we are forced to, but because we want to be better than we were. She led the Herath to a wall covered in text, the new warning written by humanity itself. "Read it," she said. The Herath leader stepped forward, his large eyes moving across the words. "We are the species you were warned about. Everything they said was true. We are persistence hunters who crossed galaxies to find those who wronged us. We are the kind ones who weep while we kill. We remember everything and forgive nothing. But we are also the ones who read your warnings and chose to be better, not because we had to, because we wanted to. The old warnings still stand. If you harm us, we will find you. If you betray us, we will remember. But now there is a new warning. If you need help, we will come. If you are dying, we will carry you. If you are lost, we will find you. We are humanity. We are exactly what they said we were. And we are so much more." The Herath finished reading. When he turned back to Nira, the fear in his eyes had changed to something else. Hope. "You are offering friendship. We are offering a choice." Nira extended her hand, a human gesture of peace. "The same choice we were given. Know what we are. Decide whether you want to know us anyway." The Herath looked at her hand for a long moment. Then he reached out and took it. In the repository of the dead, surrounded by the warnings of extinct species, two civilizations began their story. And for the first time in galactic history, it began with the truth.